Welcome back to my channel, guys, and greetings from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Well, my hotel room in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. If you're not familiar with Fort Lauderdale, it's about an hour north of Miami. Very similar to Miami in a lot of ways. I've always thought of Fort Lauderdale as a sister city to Miami, meaning it's a beach town. It's also very fitness oriented like Miami. And Fort Lauderdale also has this unique juxtaposition that Miami has, where some of the identity of this city is very much wrapped up in this Americana beach town frat boy energy, but then there's also this piece that's very LGBT friendly. And in a state that otherwise is pretty conservative, Florida, this region in South Florida is very much the exception. This is only my second time to Fort Lauderdale. The last time I actually had made a video like this, which I've since removed from my channel because we don't need to have several videos on the same subject. If you're subscribed to my channel, by the way, you might have noticed over the past year, I've been doing 2.0 versions of these gay travel videos, like a rehaul. For the ones that needed, an updated version. This is that for Fort Lauderdale. So I last came here when I first moved to Miami about 6 years ago at the time that I'm making this video. And the folklore that I've always been told and that I've always heard about Fort Lauderdale in comparison to Miami is that Miami used to be this like gay mecca in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s. And somewhere along the way, this mass migration happened to Fort Lauderdale. So if you think Miami is a gay hub, just wait till you get to Fort Lauderdale. Specifically, the region called Wilton Manors. So I always thought, and this was my recollection from my last trip to Fort Lauderdale, I always thought Wilton Manors was like a neighborhood within Fort Lauderdale, sort of like how Hell's Kitchen is a very gay neighborhood, gay yuppie neighborhood in New York City. But turns out, from the research that I did for this video, Wilton Manors is actually its own separate city independent of Fort Lauderdale. So Wilton Manors has its own municipality, its own local government. However, people lump it together with Fort Lauderdale, and people do that with Miami. People do that with New York City as well, where they kind of just lump the surrounding regions as part of the larger region. So Wilton Manors goes hand in hand with Fort Lauderdale, but I will say there is a jarring difference in that my hotel here is in Fort Lauderdale, and there are some markers of an LGBT presence, like an occasional rainbow flag, definitely seen some gay guys on the beach. But when you get to Wilton Manors, it's like going to Disneyland. Like the theme is there. Everything is very, very gay. Down to the advertisements, you're just surrounded by gay men. So I'll go into that in a second later in this video. First, let me wrap up my little intro on Fort Lauderdale. My personal feeling on Fort Lauderdale is I've always, again, found it to be this like sister city to Miami, but I've always found it to be the lesser interesting city. To me, it just doesn't have the same flavor and dynamic, sort of frenetic energy that Miami has. Fort Lauderdale is calmer. I'll say it seems cleaner, even safer, I would say, from what I've seen so far. But it's just not as, to me, not as interesting. It feels more watered down. It's also a much like whiter version of these beach towns, whereas Miami, of course, is very famous for having this like Latin infusion from Cuba, from South America, and so on. What's interesting about the timing of me making this video is that I literally found out last week that one of the only gay bars in existence in Miami Beach shut down. And it was in a spot where it's always been this rotating door of gay bars trying to survive there. And this one actually survived for years since the pandemic. It was called Nathan's. If for anybody who's familiar, who's watching this video, who's been to Miami Beach or maybe is from Miami Beach, Nathan's finally shut down. So it's been very interesting for me to come here, and there's literally like a gay city through Wilton Manors. The juxtaposition of that, I think it really is valid that for whatever reason, this has sort of become the newer gay mecca of South Florida, and Miami, for whatever reason, has always had since I've moved to Miami, has always had a hard time sustaining local gay establishments and local gay businesses. I think perhaps the difference is that Miami is very much a tourist and travel destination, whereas Wilton Manors is farther inland. It's not right on the beach. So, A, you kind of have to know about it already. B, you're more likely to have locals living and thriving there, and maybe that creates more consistent clientele and business opportunities versus the more transient element of Miami Beach. I'm curious what you guys think about this. If you're familiar with the region, please let me know your thoughts in the comments. It is peculiar to me that Miami is such a major travel hub, and yet these gay bars can't even stay open. So, to give you an idea of how gay and LGBT friendly this area is, I'm going to tell you guys how I spent the last couple of days, where I ventured out. You'll also see some images and videos that I took specifically of Wilton Manors. First, I want to say that I went to my first American gay sauna while here. I did my research. There were a couple spots, and I went to the one with the best reviews called Club Fort Lauderdale. I'm going to make a separate video about that because it was an adventure in itself. I feel like it deserves an independent video. So that will come next. So make sure, if you're curious about that, make sure to subscribe if you're not already subscribed. I went there first, and that is actually in Fort Lauderdale. And then the next evening, I was like, okay, now I have to go to Wilton Manors and really scope out the scene. Wilton Manors basically has this strip. It actually reminded me very much of West Hollywood. For those of you who have been to West Hollywood or are familiar, this long avenue, almost exclusively lined with gay establishments, gay clientele, and or gay-owned businesses. And you feel it, like it's palpable. You see men everywhere, gay men, that is, holding hands, frolicking about. I also kept seeing ads that were clearly targeting a gay audience. Like, look at this real estate ad. I've never seen this in my life. If you know, you know. This is mimicking the user experience on Grindr. Like, I find this fascinating because this is one of those things that's contextual, that only a gay person would know what's happening here with this ad. I saw this law firm that is obviously catering to gay people. It was like being in Disneyland, but the theme is not Disney. The theme is being a homosexual. And then I stumbled upon this one club called Hunters that was packed to the point where there was a sea of men outside. Now, I actually thought this was pretty cool because I've only ever seen this happen in Europe, where it's so busy and also warm out that people are just hanging out outside. It's actually kind of nice, right? To see this overflow outside on the streets versus everybody being jam-packed inside, a cube building. Again, the juxtaposition of this versus knowing that a gay bar in the neighborhood where I live in Miami just shut down because it presumably could not sustain business is so interesting to me. I'm like, oh, this is where the gays in the area have been. I will say that much like West Hollywood, Wilton Manors feels much older. Like, I had to be one of the younger guys that I saw walking around, which is fine. It's just worth mentioning that it skews older. It's a very specific kind of demographic. And I think these are probably, men of a certain age who longed for community for a very long time. And now they found it. They built their own community in Wilton Manors. But I personally didn't feel like I fully blended in or fit in. And just in general, in Fort Lauderdale and in Wilton Manors, I didn't feel like this was my crowd. I do think it's important for gay men to feel a sense of community and belonging. So I was pleasantly surprised that Wilton Manors is through and through more than a gay neighborhood. Again, it's like a gay city, which is so interesting. But I feel like in general, there's a lack of tact here. And you could say the same about Miami, though. I think Miami is a little bit more elevated, at least in the city of Miami versus the beach. Listen, you could say this about any place in the world that's not a big metropolis. I think I was maybe spoiled by having lived in New York City throughout my 20s, that, I like a refined gentleman. And I did not really find that here, whether on the apps or in person. It's very much like casual Florida beach town energy. And of course, that's going to attract a a similar kind of demographic. Now, no trip to Wilton Manors is complete without a visit to the Eagle. I've talked about the Eagle many times on my channel before. It's basically like a chain of leather gay bars. For being out and about so early, like 9ish p.m., the bars were pretty busy. You know how on Google Maps it'll tell you like the peak busy times? It was the peak busy times. It's kind of nice to go out somewhere where you don't have to wait till 1 a.m. or midnight to go out because people are already out earlier. I think that's a combination of it being like a neighborhood hangout spot. Also, probably the fact that most of the men are much older. Now, because it was early enough, I didn't see anything crazy happen at the Eagle. Some of you who are familiar with the Eagle know that late night, all kinds of things happen. But I did love the vibe with the red lights and their signage that I found entertaining all around the Eagle. So I definitely recommend a visit to the Eagle if you're ever in the area and you appreciate a consistent theme for a gay bar. That's it for my video on Fort Lauderdale and Wilton Manors. Again, next video, I'll be talking about my visit to the gay sauna here in Fort Lauderdale. So make sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll catch you guys next time.